Hey everyone, it's Schmuckles. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 30 actually, and why and how it's been leaked to kind of be a licensed paragraph. This is actually 2 chapters away. It's not the anniversary chapter, which is Chapter 28, or the next one, which is Chapter 29. We're talking 6 months down the road, Chapter 30. Just for clarification, this person right here, Dweet, posted something and said that none of these leaks come from me. They are not sourced from me. They were shared in a public Discord server with thousands of members. Anyone could join, see, and share these things because they were sent publicly. Blaming me for the leaks is nonsense. So Dweet actually isn't the primary source of the leaks, and these leaks actually, which a lot of people are covering now, is stuff that was made public by an unknown source. I don't actually know where these leaks came from, but they've been posted in public places, and people like myself and Dweet and other even Fog Whispers are now posting about these leaks and kind of just having discussions about them. The main thing I wanted to focus on here was the fact that Dweet said that the killer-only chapter coming this November will be licensed, which is Chapter 30. And if you recall, if you take a look at the roadmap, November's chapter was the only killer paragraph chapter, and apparently it's being leaked that it's going to be a licensed chapter. Now, there's a lot of possibilities for what license could come into this game. It's very interesting now because now that Nicolas Cage is actually stepping into the fog, well, this is not even a character, this is a celebrity. So could other celebrities, you know, in the movie business come into Dead by Daylight? I kind of wanted to go over some of the possible licenses that could come into the game that would make sense as just a licensed paragraph, meaning just a killer and no survivor. People are actually hopeful that Five Nights at Freddy's is going to be this license because this is going to come very shortly after the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, which is released, I believe, October 27th of this year. If the new chapter is coming in November, you got to keep in mind that the PTB is going live 3 weeks prior to the actual live release of the chapter. It's like 3 to 4 weeks, and if Springtrap were to come into this game as a paragraph, that would probably be before the release of the actual movie itself. But it's entirely possible that it's not Springtrap. It's just worth mentioning that these are how the dates would line up if it is a Five Nights at Freddy's chapter. I think every single video game property does not make sense as a licensed paragraph, with exception to 2 options. I think Five Nights at Freddy's and Slenderman could make sense as just a licensed paragraph because there's no clear survivor that could come into the game for either one of those licenses. That line of thinking would eliminate Dead Space, The Last of Us, or The Evil Within as possibilities because they have really clear survivors that would come in as the survivors. Starting right here, Jack Torrance. I think Wendy Torrance would be the obvious choice for a survivor, so I wouldn't think Jack Torrance would be like one of the main possibilities or something you would speculate to be a licensed paragraph. Vecna would make sense as a licensed paragraph if Stranger Things ever did return to Dead by Daylight because we already have survivors in the game. That being said, I don't think Vecna would be a top contender, but it does seem to make sense as a licensed paragraph if something with Netflix changes that's obvious between now and then. The Thing, I would expect RJ McReady to come in. I would expect Frankenstein's creator to come in as a survivor with Frankenstein, so that doesn't quite make sense to me either. I always pictured Scooby-Doo to come in as a survivor paragraph. Jason Voorhees wouldn't really make sense as a paragraph kind of chapter because I could picture at least 4 people that could come in as survivors from that, whether it's the leading protagonist, final girl in the first 3 movies, or Tommy Jarvis. The Fisherman from I Know What You Did Last Summer makes sense as more of a niche option. The Invisible Man, there's a leading protagonist in that movie, so I'd expect her to come in as the new survivor, so I wouldn't consider her to be kind of one of the top options. I'd expect Dutch to come in as a survivor from Predator, one of the most iconic characters from the franchise. Same thing goes for the Alien because Alan Ripley would surely come in as a survivor. The Babadook has a clear protagonist character that would come in as a survivor too. Art the Clown seems like it could kind of make sense. There are a variety of characters that could come in as survivors, but nothing is as iconic as Art the Clown himself. I would expect Brendan Fraser to come in with a Mummy chapter. A licensed version of Dracula, I suppose, could make sense as a niche option if they didn't want to bring in any sort of survivor with that. There are some survivors that would make sense in a Dracula chapter based on the renditions of Dracula over the years, but I could see them just being like, we just only want Dracula, that's going to be our licensed paragraph. Pennywise kind of makes sense because the first movie, The Loser Club, is all kids. The sequel does in fact have the grown-up versions of the character, so you could argue that they would make sense as survivors with a Pennywise chapter, but I still think Pennywise paragraph could make sense. I don't think Chucky really makes a lot of sense. I mean, Matthew Cote has openly questioned, like, would you want to play as Chucky, implying that Chucky is not really something that behavior is looking at right now. The Terminator kind of does make sense, though I would expect either Sarah Connor or John Connor to come in as survivors. Patrick Bateman could kind of make sense as a licensed paragraph as well. I think Slenderman is actually a really, really good option for a licensed paragraph too, because there's not really really very many clear options for survivors with Slenderman, and clearly there's a lot of hype surrounding that license. Same thing goes for the Candyman license. You know, Helen could come in as a survivor, but Helen kind of appears as a Candy Woman at the end of Candyman 1. We also kind of saw that the protagonist of the new Candyman movie is kind of the new Candyman, so I don't know if it'd be like that version of the character or Tony Todd, but I really could see Candyman working as an option for a licensed paragraph. It's just a matter of, are they able to get the rights? I'd expect the TV show Supernatural to come in with survivors if that chapter ever came into DBD. BioShock, I'm not so sure. It's kind of a niche license and kind of a wild card. It is a video game, so I'd expect it to be a full chapter. Norman Bates could kind of make sense as a licensed paragraph. Definitely more of a niche license and not one of the bigger license options. I already talked about Alien a little bit, but I would expect Ellen Ripley to come in with that chapter if we ever saw the Xenomorph in Dead by Daylight. I'm not quite sure about Siren Head. I don't know very much about that license, but I'd imagine that they could adapt Siren Head as a licensed paragraph, just based on the things I've seen about this concept and the creator wanting this concept in Dead by Daylight. Valak or the Nun I could also see as a licensed paragraph if they're unable to get the actual Conjuring license for whatever reason. Since the Nun was on the satisfaction survey a couple of years ago and not the Conjuring, it's possible that they're not able to get their hands on Ed or Lorraine Warren. The Nun is actually a spin-off movie that includes Valak but not Ed or Lorraine Warren, so if they were to get that version of the character, that could be a licensed paragraph. We've talked about this in a couple of videos on this channel already, but I don't think they'd ever bring Jeepers Creepers into this game. There's too much controversy surrounding the license. Hannibal Lecter seems like a really good option for a licensed paragraph too. I think that Pumpkinhead, the Leprechaun, and the Tallman also all could be considered niche licenses that could come into the game as only paragraphs. Since we know that they're bringing in Nicolas Cage as a licensed paragraph survivor, it seems like any of the niche licensed killers that we have is possible. I'm hoping it's one of the big licenses, meaning one of the top 10 licenses. These were the most hyped licensed killers that we found in our tournament from 2022. And out of these licenses, it seemed like these ones were the ones that made the most sense to come in without a survivor. No matter how much analysis we do of which killer makes the most sense to come in without a survivor, there's always an outside chance that they bring in any chapter here. The reason I say this is because they brought in the Cenobite without Kirsty Cotton, they brought in Leatherface without Sally Hardesty, so sometimes for whatever reason they don't bring in the obvious corresponding survivor with the chapter. We don't know exactly why this happens. It could be troubles licensing the rights of the character through the license holder, or it could be some problem that they had getting the likeness rights for the actor that played the character. They've gone around getting the likeness rights for the actor who plays the character before, because Laurie Strode is actually based on the comic book version of Laurie and not Jamie Lee Curtis. So I feel like they could have brought in a different version of Kirsty Cotton. So I feel like if they had problems there, they could have brought in a different version of Kirsty Cotton or Sally Hardesty, but they chose not to. Another thing I wanted to talk about is this idea of a survivor paragraph after this chapter in November. There's no other information about other chapters, like there's no leaks that chapter 29 is original, but the only thing that we have right now is that chapter 30 is apparently going to be licensed. Things can change, sources can be wrong, so definitely take this information with a grain of salt, but the data mining community, which has been correct up to this point with every single leak from Gabriel Soma to the Singularity to now the trailer, are now saying that chapter 30, the November chapter, is going to be licensed. So this comes from the same group of people that have seems to be a steady stream of reliable leaks. It makes me wonder, we have that new survivor paragraph after the anniversary, which is likely Nicolas Cage actually, and this is something that's going to be revealed, I think, at the anniversary. We'll have to wait and see for that. Pretty sure it's going to be Nicolas Cage though. And then after chapter 30, we have another paragraph, and that makes me wonder, like, could we have a licensed paragraph there too? And if it was a licensed survivor paragraph, which is, you know, it could be an original paragraph like Michaela was, but if it was a licensed paragraph, something like The Walking Dead seems like it would make a lot of sense in that slot right there. Any big horror property that you can think of that would make no sense as a full chapter with a killer, like I think Walking Dead's probably the best example of this, seems like it could be possible in January. We still don't have any word from the data mining community, right? Like, this thing could absolutely be original. It'd be interesting to see what they do with that paragraph, especially since they're already bringing in a licensed paragraph with Nicolas Cage. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments section below. It is kind of a ways out, but which license do you think would be most likely for chapter 30 if that new killer is actually a licensed paragraph? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to be up to date with all of the Dead by Daylight speculations, theories, and news regarding leaks and upcoming content into the game. That does it for this video. Goodbye.